Dia salah satu perempuan paling berpengaruh di dunia.
Well, becoming the CEO of YouTube was a big decision for me.
Mother of YouTube, ibu dari platform yang mengubah begitu banyak. Mata Najwa terbang ke markas YouTube di Silicon Valley, California untuk berbincang dengannya. Kami menggali cerita tentang platformnya yang digunakan ratusan juta orang setiap hari. Juga bertemu dengan orang-orang Indonesia yang berada di belakangnya.
There's so much that we want to discuss with you. You've been a CEO for YouTube for 8 years now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yes.
you've been with Google for 24 years.
Yes.
Wow. Has it been more challenging over the years, or has it been more manageable because you've been a pioneer in this field for so long?
It's just changed so much. There's no comparison between what it was like when I first started and now. So when I first started working at Google, I was actually employee 16 of Google. And Google had no revenue. Nobody had heard of Google. And so the challenges were very different. At first was about like how do you create a brand? How do you build a brand? How do you is this a product that people want? And now, if you fast forward today, the challenges that we have are very different. It's about running a much bigger service, having a global brand, and there's also a lot more scrutiny and responsibility that comes with running a really big company.
Semua berawal dari garasinya. Menlo Park, Silicon Valley, 1999. Susan menyewakan garasinya kepada dua mahasiswa Stanford University, Larry Page dan Sergey Brin, yang kala itu tengah merintis bisnis teknologi mereka, Google.
Because I actually joined Google with no revenue. It had just gotten started. It wasn't a proven company at all.
In your garage?
It was in my garage. But the thing I'm pointing out is the reason I wanted it in the garage, it was not because they were famous or doing anything great. It's because I wanted the rent. Just to be clear, I needed it to pay the mortgage of the house.
So that was also a big important.
That was the whole reason I had them there. Yeah, they weren't famous.
But
And
you sort of knew that they would become big.
maybe.
Like a hunch or?
No, at first I had no idea.
Okay.
I had no idea when they first started. I just rented it for them for the rent. But then, as I started talking to them and I started using the service, I began to realize that they were onto something good. And that's when I joined the company. But joining them was a big step. I was actually pregnant. I had a mortgage. So joining a company with no revenue was not an obvious decision.
Susan pun bergabung menjadi karyawan nomor 16, menjabat manajer pemasaran yang pertama di Google. Prestasinya, Google AdWords, AdSense, Analytics adalah contoh produk-produk ciptaan Susan. Tapi keputusannya yang paling meninggalkan impak bagi kita adalah menyarankan Google untuk membeli YouTube, di saat banyak orang justru meragukan platform video ini.
Well, becoming the CEO of YouTube was a big decision for me. Actually, like Larry, the founder of Google, was the one who asked me. He asked me, like, what do you think about YouTube? And I knew that if I didn't, in that moment, say that I wanted the job, I may never have another chance at it. So I had to.
That's just another way of proving that, women should have, should take the initiative, should say yes when the job offer comes. I mean, that's just another example of how you make it in this world.
I
right?
knew that if I didn't say yes right then and there, that I wouldn't have another chance.
Did you have any doubts at all?
No.
No?
I thought
you
it
knew
was.
it right away?
Yeah. He asked me and I thought about it and I was like, yeah, this would be great. I mean, the only reason I might have had reservation is because I was running Google's advertising. I was building Google's advertising system. So I had more reports. There was more revenue. YouTube was pretty small. And so a lot of people were asking, back then it was really small. And so people were asking like, well, why are you going to this smaller job? You have less responsibility in some ways. But I knew that video was going to be big.
Nilai YouTube kini 17 kali lipat harga akuisisinya. Dengan lebih dari 2 miliar pengguna aktif, YouTube berkembang menjadi platform raksasa dunia. Namun di sisi lain, sejumlah negara punya aturan khusus terhadap YouTube, termasuk memblokirnya.
I want to talk about more about the how we've seen now there's this increased calls for regulations of big internet platform companies in the areas of safety, privacy, business model competitions. And you've been in the tech industry for 30 years. So what do you think should be the approach in regulating the industry?
Sure. Well, definitely we are seeing a lot more regulation everywhere in the world. We're across the board, and I think it's not just us. It's all types of technology and all types of media content. And I first want to just point out that I do think that services like Google and YouTube have enabled a lot of new voices, a lot of new information. And we've seen a lot of jobs, economic creation and value that has come out of that, along with people's ability to educate themselves and get entertainment for free and services that are very valuable. So I think in general, our goal is to figure out, and the goal of governments is to figure out how do we preserve what is good about the internet. But then it's also brought up hard challenges. YouTube sees it particularly with issues around some of the core issues have been around content moderation. We always work with governments to the extent that they're trying to figure out what the right policies are and explaining what could be unintended consequences of that policies. But we do want to think it's important to enable companies like ours to continue to have the ability to make decisions. And we are responsive.
Sometimes government are stepping in too far?
Well, I mean, we work with governments, and I think one of the challenges sometimes the governments don't. There can be unintended consequences where they may intend something. They have good intentions. We're aligned with what those intentions are, but it could have consequences that would go far beyond what they ever intended.
And if you see that happening, what sort of steps that YouTube usually takes? Would you just talk directly to each government and trying to lobby them, or what will usually happen behind those closed doors? Because right now in Indonesia, they're preparing a new regulations that would make the internet platforms, they would get fined, even criminally charged if they fail to take down an unlawful content for 4 hours. And they said that this new regulation could be the toughest globally on social media. So what's your take on that? I mean, it's still going on right now. The debate is still going on.
Sure.
So we can see that happening.
Sure. Well, so, I mean, usually what happens when there are regulations like that, we will meet with the government and we will look at it, because of course we also don't want to have unlawful information on our platform. But there's also a question of, how is that defined?
Of course. It could be very arbitrary. Unlawful could mean like a lot of things to a lot of people.
It could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It also means, what does it mean 4 hours? Is it 4 hours from when it was posted? Is it 4 hours from when we were notified? Exactly. So how is that actually defined? And then, so we'll work with governments to make sure that it's something that can be accomplished, and B, that it accomplishes what they really want. And sometimes our creators will also talk about it to the government, because the creators will be concerned, because if there's regulation that's passed that impacts them, that could hurt their business, their ability to generate revenue or have views, it's important for the governments to know about that as well.
And sometimes, we've seen in certain part of the world, government using these new regulations to actually curtail the free, the freedom of the speech, and then to curtail the free expression. So they're using this tool to suppress critical voices. How does YouTube see that? I mean, using internet regulations to actually, quiet down the critical voices in the country.
I mean, we have seen that in some parts of the world, not all parts of the world, and
it's a worrying trend, though.
It is a worrying trend, but we see it in some parts more than other parts. And some governments more than other governments, and in general, we want to enable political speech. So like when we do get requests that would involve suppression of political speech, that's a place where we're very hesitant or resistant to removing it. There can be many different cases. So there could be, and that's why I say every case depends upon what's happening. It could be if there's some risk of civil unrest or danger to citizens, that's something that we would certainly look at. But in general, we want to be enabling, enable people to express their points of view and enable as much free speech as we possibly can have. That also happens with human rights.
Of course.
We'll also see that with human rights. And if we're worried that there's violations of human rights, that's another place. So we may get requests that we can't always honor from various governments as a result of that.
As being a private companies, can you do that? Can you like say no to governments? I mean, how do you draw the line? Where does the responsibility of the government and then the private companies and other stakeholders? It's a really tricky balancing thing.
It is. And I will say that, governments pass laws and we try to adhere to the laws as much as possible. Sometimes there's some gray areas about how it's interpreted. But if you, for example, have a non-democratically elected government and they're asking us to remove content that would be suppressing free speech of people who are being persecuted in some way, that's a place where it would be, for example, of where it would be harder for us to remove that content. We would keep it up.
Tantangannya menyeimbangkan antara kebebasan berekspresi dengan kebutuhan melindungi audiens dari konten-konten negatif. Sepanjang tahun 2021, YouTube menghapus tak kurang dari 25 juta video karena melanggar community guideline mereka. Dengan jutaan video baru muncul di tiap harinya, tentu ini bukan tugas mudah.
Do you yourself believe in censorship? Because, some would argue that censorship can actually be counterproductive. If you want to fight misinformation, it's by doing that to have a free flow of information, not by censoring it. What do you think?
There are lines that we draw that we think don't make sense for us to have on our platform, like adult content. Like that was probably the first policy that was made. If we had enabled adult content, it would have really changed what the nature of YouTube is. So, we look at many different important areas, and we believe that it's important for us as a service. We're paying for the hosting of the platform, the distribution of that content. We're an advertising-supported content provider. If we have a lot of content that is seen as undesirable or not supporting society or not being responsible, we'll also see pullback from our advertising community. So, we want to do the right thing, but we also, as a business, I believe, operate very differently than, say, the internet as a whole, where people can go and post their information.
Perempuan dan teknologi, dua hal yang kerap dianggap berseberangan. Tapi sosok Susan menjadi bukti yang bisa meruntuhkan konsepsi itu. Selain cukup vokal, ia giat mengadvokasi kebijakan-kebijakan yang lebih ramah terhadap perempuan bagi lingkungan kerja, termasuk meningkatkan jumlah karyawan perempuan di YouTube.
And I remember reading your article in Vanity Fair. I think it was called the Silicon Valley Boys Club.
They're breaking up the Silicon Valley Boys Club.
Because it was so vividly described, the implicit biases that women are facing in the workplace. And it's happening in every industry, especially in the male-dominated industry. My question is, do you still face that challenges, or now that, being the Susan Wojcicki, now the challenges are different for you?
Really what I'm focused on right now are trying to support younger women and women in the workforce. That's really my main focus, and trying to be a role model and trying to talk about being a woman and challenges that I may have faced and how I address them. So that's what I'm really focused on. I think technology is a great field. It's a growing field. It's where the jobs are. It's what's changing our world. And it's upset me that women are not equally represented. They are underrepresented in technology. And so you think this is the trends of the future. These are the jobs of the future. And women are not getting the skills to participate in that. And as a result, I believe it's going to set women back because they're not going to be part of this new economy and this new media.
Raffi.
Ya, Pak.
Saya mau bertanya pada Raffi.
Apa, Pak?
Cita-citanya Pengen jadi apa?
Jadi YouTubers, Pak.
Keputusan-keputusan Susan dalam pengelolaan YouTube tentu terasa pengaruhnya sampai ke Indonesia. Sebanyak 139 juta atau lebih dari setengah populasi Indonesia adalah pengguna aktif YouTube. Tidak heran jika YouTuber jadi profesi yang banyak diimpikan anak-anak muda. Sebuah riset bahkan menyebut 31% remaja ingin menjadi social media influencer atau YouTuber.
Kids nowadays, when
Yes.
they're asked, what do they want to be when they grow up?
Yes.
They don't say doctors or, engineers anymore. They say they want to be a YouTuber. So what's your take on that? The notions that now kids are seeing YouTube content creator as a dream job.
Yeah, and it's for some creators, it will become a profession. But I would say for kids, even when it's not going to become a profession, or for young adults or college-age students, it is a way for people to express themselves and to share a passion. And you think about different programs that you would do in school, right, where you're writing an essay. In order to create content, as you know, to create a video, you have to write a script. You have to have a point of view. You have to express it, and you have to think about the brand and what you're expressing. So I do think that there are a lot of advantages for users to think about it, even though some of them will go on and become stars, and some may just do it as a hobby in the future.
Tak hanya YouTuber, bekerja di raksasa teknologi seperti YouTube maupun Google juga jadi impian anak Indonesia. Saya mampir ke Googleplex, bertemu dengan dua anak muda yang bekerja di sini. Rachel Saputro sudah 4 tahun bekerja di Google. Kini ia seorang program manager di DeepMind, laboratorium AI Google. Juga Alif Rohman, 4 tahun juga bekerja di Google. Alif adalah engineer di sistem web crawling Google. Kantor Google terkenal dengan beragam fasilitas yang menyenangkan. Ini juga jadi salah satu alasan mengapa banyak sekali anak muda bermimpi bisa bekerja di sini. Tapi ada alasan di balik semua fasilitas gratis ini.
Mungkin balance juga ya, all about balance Mbak Nana. Sini target setiap tim lumayan agresif juga, dan core worknya pasti banyak, tapi
Kerja keras, Kak.
iya.
Karena kalau di sini kayak main, terus nanti kita jalan-jalan, ada dinosaurus, makan, minum. Ini jangan-jangan nanti orang miranya kerja di Google senang-senang ini. Di target juga kan?
Dua-duanya,
Dua-duanya.
iya. Work hard, play hard, iya. Bener.
Dan memang the whole reason, tujuan utama Rachel dan Alif kerja di Google untuk memberi dampak. Apakah itu memang motivasi utamanya atau sesederhana kayaknya keren aja kerja di Google gitu. Motivasi utama, dan apakah memang merasa sudah dapat apa yang dicari dengan kerja di tech company sebesar Google?
Ya itu sebenarnya salah satunya sih. Kayak kita tuh, kalau aku sih pribadi emang pengen membuat sesuatu yang impact-nya tuh langsung kerasa ke semua orang lah kayak gitu. Dan kebetulan banget kan kayak apa aku yang buat tuh bisa ada dampaknya ke Google Search kan, itu keren banget menurutku. Tapi yang kedua tuh sebenarnya aku merasa kayak technical challenge-nya itu jauh lebih susah di sini ketika berhadapan sama jumlah data. Kan web tuh banyak banget kan, berapa sih jumlah website di web itu, mungkin jutaan lebih bahkan kan, miliaran kayak gitu. Itu teknik-tekniknya tuh jadi beda gitu. Jadi aku emang pengen belajar dari expert-expertnya yang udah bertahun-tahun mengerjakan hal itu. Jadi aku pengen mengabsorb otak mereka gitu. Kayak gitu sih
Dan
sebenarnya.
kesempatan itu memang hanya bisa didapatkan kalau kerja di lingkungan kantor yang memang talent pool-nya itu besar dan sevariatif itu. Jadi merasa ter-challenge terus.
Iya, kayak gitu bener.
Dan kalau kemudian cita-cita anak-anak atau anak-anak muda sesimpel mau seperti Alif mau kerja di sini juga gitu, sesimpel itu cita-cita yang valid kan?
Itu yang paling itu.
Iya kan? And what would you say to them?
I mean, adalah itu semua mungkin karena aku dulu merasa sangat discourage, kayak aku nggak tahu kalau itu bisa gitu, aku bisa keluar kayak gitu.
Oh, kamu juga sempat dulu kayak ragu gitu?
I had a lot of doubt in the beginning. Aku nggak yakin lah bisa kayak gitu sama sekali. Tapi I think like I talk to some of my friends kayak dan alumni TB juga yang udah itu, dan mereka bilang it's okay gitu. Kayak the worst thing that can happen, kayak paling parahnya aku ya udah kan nggak dapat gitu, aku bisa coba lagi, aku bisa kayak learning apa sih yang aku kurang, aku pelajarin, Habis itu aku
Jadi ada
universitas
prosesnya
ini.
nggak langsung keterima juga ya. Soalnya
iya.
anak-anak sekarang maunya instan. Soalnya ngelihat di Instagram tuh kayaknya langsung
Iya, iya.
jadi gitu. Nggak kelihatan tuh
Berat,
pas lagi
ya, itu susah,
selonjoran-selonjoran kayak Andovi gini nggak kelihatan. Ini Andovi lagi selonjoran di sini. Behind the scene-nya. Nah, tapi gitu kan.
Iya.
Banyak anak muda sekarang apalagi dengan sosial media gitu ya ngelihat pas lagi serunya kita foto
Iya.
di sini nih,
Iya.
nggak tahu kita keren di sini nih karena ada yang lagi selonjoran di sini
Bener.
gitu. Tapi jadi you went through that process kan?
Iya, iya.
Tahun pertama aku kerja di Google ya Mbak Nana, di meja ada pajangan, ada print out, semua email mungkin ada lebih dari 10 ditolak Google. Karena aku dulu pengen banget kerja di Google, jadi kayak aku apply mungkin kayak 7-8 kali dan aku print out semua rejectionnya, aku
Sengaja
pajang.
kamu taruh?
Sengaja. Karena itu kan yang kayak Alex bilang proses, semuanya proses dan kayaknya kalau mau belajar anything bisa, kita bisa belajar resource-nya banyak, zaman sekarang digital semua ada dan banyak banget sebenarnya program mentorship dari tinggal kita Google aja sih sebenarnya kayak mentorship tech Indonesian. Mau yang dari sisi women ada, mau yang dari sisi coding ada, sisi segala macam udah banyak banget yang ada sekarang.
Dan kalau tadi bicara skill, kalau bicara mindset yang harus kita punya. Kalau we wanna foster this environment dan juga foster lebih banyak lagi bisa lahir Indonesia Digital Talent.
Mungkin mindset penasaran. I think asking questions atau penasaran tentang apapun maupun topik atau skill atau industri kesehatan, finance, anything itu bisa lead kita untuk menemukan challenge yang baru, menemukan solusi yang baru. Tapi it just all starts dari kita penasaran aja.
Harus kepo.
Harus kepo, bener.
Harus kepo ya.
Harus
Itu
kepo.
skill itu. Untungnya di Indonesia sangat pintar yang kepo ya.
Iya betul.
Harus always stay curious
Iya,
ya.
stay curious.
Penasaran,
Iya.
pengen tahu dan juga jangan cuma berhenti di penasarannya.
Iya.
Cari tahu gitu ya.
Iya.
Pengen tahu dan cari tahu.
Kalau aku nambahin lagi sebenarnya mindset terbuka sih. Jadi kalau misalkan ya hargain pendapat orang lain. Kalau misalkan semua punya pendapat, mungkin pendapat kamu benar, tapi mungkin juga ada sisi lain gitu. Jadi kalau misalkan kayak different opinion kan sebenarnya bisa dikembangin jadi ketika buat produk gitu kan semuanya bisa ke cover lah kayak gitu karena semua opinion itu bisa valid kayak gitu sih. Terus sama kalau mau nambahin tadi sebenarnya salah satu challenge buat tech Indonesia itu sebenarnya akses sih. Kayak sekarang kan semua produk tuh nggak semua sih tapi kayak kebanyakan tuh fokusnya masih di ibu kota-kota besar. Indonesia kan kepulauan, kayak gimana caranya orang-orang Indonesia yang nggak tinggal di kota besar juga dapat efek positifnya kayak gitu.
So how do you see Indonesia's role? I mean, we are the fourth most populous country. I mean, 100 million people daily now tune into YouTube. So how do you see, I mean, how can we play like a more active role, not just as a consumer, but also, as a content creator, create more content, actively involved in this creative new ecosystem?
Well, Indonesia is a really important market, and one of the things that we've seen with Indonesia is that it's a early adopter of a lot of features. It's a very dynamic culture and embracing technology, and so I think Indonesia for us is an important place to continue to invest. And we've seen these incredible stories about what happens when people see content and they have that available. There was actually like a really amazing story I read about a son who helped his mom by creating a robot, and he learned how to create that robot
From
on YouTube.
Yeah. Do you still remember the first video on YouTube that you watched?
Yes, I do. So I had an unusual experience, which is that I was part of creating online video experience.
Yes.
So Google actually, around the same time that YouTube was created, Google, actually even before YouTube was created, we decided that we were going to have people post their videos and just upload them to Google. The first video was actually of a bunch of puppets, and they were singing some kind of Nordic language. It was a language I didn't know. And I wasn't sure what to think about it because it was so unusual and I'd never seen anything like that before. But
It wasn't on TV for sure.
no, it definitely wasn't. It definitely was not traditional
TV, yeah,
media.
yeah.
It was more user-generated type of content. And then I also remember the first big hit that we had, which was actually a Backstreet Boys video, which was
Like a real band or just someone singing Backstreet
no,
Boys?
it was two students in China doing their homework. Actually, their roommates doing their homework in the back, and the kids are singing.
okay.
And it was so funny. And that was the first video that was a hit on
It was
Google
that
Video at the
random.
time.
Back then, it was that random video. It still is now.
It's the same thing. It's still like someone who does something that's unknown, but it's really funny, and it catches everyone's attention. And that's what we saw. And so we realized that people who are not necessarily famous can create a video that everyone else wants to see. And that regular people have a lot to share, and that people actually want to watch regular people's videos. And so that insight, like, oh, it doesn't have to always be a star.
Yeah.
Stars can be made from people who are just doing their daily lives and sharing something about them. And so having that insight that everyone can be a star, everyone can share something about their life, and people do want to see that, and they do want to connect to each other that way.
That's the DNA of YouTube, you think? That's the core values of YouTube, that everyone can be a student and a teacher?
Definitely. I mean, so we talk about having a mission, which is to give everyone a voice and to show them the world. The idea that everyone has something to share, and that you can learn a lot, that you can see the world. You could be at home, but you could learn anything. You could experience a world. You could hear all kinds of voices and perspectives from YouTube. And so that's part of our mission.
Di masa depan, setiap orang bisa menjadi populer. Hanya dalam waktu 15 menit, kata seniman tersohor Andy Warhol. Tibalah kita di masa yang sudah melampauinya. Seseorang bisa muncul, entah dari mana, lalu hanya butuh 15 detik untuk dicintai. Silih berganti, setiap hari kita merayakan yang baru sembari melupakan yang lalu. Pun bagi yang tiba waktunya memudar, setidaknya cerita mereka pernah didengar. Dari dalam layar, mereka bisa sebebas itu berkisah sambil seakan menatap langsung penontonnya satu persatu. Bahkan kepada orang yang tidak pernah mereka sangka. Begitu luas, hingga mereka tak lagi bisa menerka kemana cerita itu akan sampai dan menjadi begitu berharga.
All right, so here we are, one of the elephants. Cool thing about these guys is that they have really, really, really long trunks, and that's cool. And that's pretty much all there is to say.
But YouTube has actually, shaping the culture, shaping the world, has big responsibilities.
Sure.
Does that weigh got to you sometimes, being, to have that enormous power and responsibility?
There are definitely times where it does weigh on me, but I also really want to be thinking about how to go out to the experts and get the best advice from the experts. So, but it does weigh on me, and there are times that something happens where I see something and I want to do a good job. I want to be responsible. I want to help people, and so there are times where there's something that I see that could upset me, or I worry, like, how can we help?
And what do you usually do when those times come? Watch YouTube?
No. I usually get on the
YouTube
phone.
like a work for you now?
No, I usually send an email to the people that work for me about how we're gonna fix the situation.
So it's still working. I mean, how do you relax and?
Oh, how do I relax? Well, I relax. I love to be outside. I love to be in nature and see friends and family and just have fun.
Yeah, it's always good.
I try to have balance. Otherwise, you burn out.
Of course, being a CEO of YouTube.
Yes.